We're glad you're here. All of a sudden, lofty skies, I sing the wisdom that ordained the sun to rule the day. The moon shines full at his command, and all the stars obey. I sing the goodness of the Lord that filled the earth with food. He formed the creatures with his word and then pronounced them good. Lord, how thy wonders are displayed where'er I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread, or gaze upon the sky, there's not a plant or flower below, but makes the glories drone. And clouds arise and tempests blow by order from thy throne. While all that borrows life from is ever in thy care, and everywhere that man can be, thou God art present there. Turn one page over to 129. Great and mighty is the Lord our God. Great and mighty is great and mighty is he. Great and mighty is the Lord our God. Great and mighty is he. Lift up your banner, let the anthems ring. Praises to our King. Great and mighty is the Lord our God. Great and mighty is he. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this time that we have of sharing tonight. I thank you for those who are going to share. Just guide what they say tonight, and that everything we do will glorify you. Thank you for the stories we have of how you changed our lives and made us new and different. Continue to bless us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we had a little change. Steve? Was that? Oh, Ricky. Ricky he became sick today, so we have the second stringer. No. Brandon shared last week, and he has decided he's going to share some more tonight. And he's taken over for Ricky. And then we're going to have Jarron and Amanda. Amanda first, I'm sorry. Amanda and then Jarron are going to share. And then Beau, who is just fresh back from the Philippines, working to get young ladies out of sex trafficking, and he's going to be the third. I'm just going to share something. I'm hoping that each one of you every month has something new that God has done in your life. And I don't know if you know, but Stan and I go to our neighbors, and we're praying for neighbors over here. Well, I also start going around my neighborhood. I got 8 different neighbors that I'm starting to pray for. And one of them, the first time I went, he says, Adam, he says, my father has cancer, pancreatic cancer. And I said I would pray. I went back yesterday, and he says, The chemo has shrunk the cancer to the place that they can do surgery. And so his name is Bruce, if you want to pray for him. Bruce is going to have surgery now and to remove the cancer that's in his body. So as you're blessing people, God's going to give you some great rewards and some great things are going to happen. It was part of that. I met Beau's parents as we were praying for people in this neighborhood. And Sylvia is here. We've been praying for her for a couple years. And she bakes tremendous cakes, I think. She's never baked a cake for me, but no, I'm just kidding. But Sylvia is here for the first time, and so we're just glad to have Sylvia. And you have to speak Spanish to her. Richard, you can speak Spanish to her. I can't. But we're glad you're here. That's how God works all the time. If we engage with people, God's going to do something great for us and for them as well. So this evening, Brandon, come on up here. Brandon shared last month, first time, about some of his life and what has happened in his life. And so tonight he's going to continue that. And Brandon, we're glad you're here, my brother in Christ. Thank you. Just hold that close now so we can hear you. Or I'll tell you that we can't hear you.
Thank you guys for having me back again, even though it was no choice, there was nobody else to fill the spot. So, last time I shared, I kind of went through my background, just drug addict, all that good stuff, overdosing. And I really didn't get to kind of get into what God has been doing since then as much as I like to, because, I feel like testimonies, the first time I gave my testimony was, once again, it was kind of thrown on the spot, and it was out at the tent revival in Longdale, and it was like 30 minutes, to fill in, and I probably spent 25 of that explaining to everybody what a horrible person I was. And then I had just had, and then I found God, now I'm good. Since then, it's grown. I'm part of a Forgotten Ministries. After I graduated the program, I just decided I felt God was calling me just to stay on. And if anybody lives on missions, that's a kind of a tough decision, because, you're going to live kind of minimally, and you really truly learn how to deny yourself every day. And I got a passage I'd like to share. It's out of Matthew. It's 25, and it's the sheep and the goats. I'm going to start at 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another, just as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right side and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to these on the right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you, the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. And I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, and thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, and without clothes clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." So, since I found Jesus and I gave up, I've personally witnessed all of that. Like I said last time, Jerry Irwin came and visited me in jail. The ministry, I came there with nothing, and they fed me, and they clothed me, and they took me in. So now, I get the opportunity every day to express that same love out, through, we have a homeless shelter, and, we do different outreaches and stuff, and I've come to that thing where I don't have to. It's that new norm. So many people talk about, well, that's just normal, and before I was just a drug addict. That's just what I did. That's who I was. That's who I was made to be. And, now it's just, we don't have to be like that. I talked last time about new creation. And when you totally embrace that new creation, it's that new normal. So, we talk about discipleship a lot. And when I read that scripture there, I think about how important it is to go out and continue to make disciples, because I can't do it on alone. You can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. And that's not what we're made to do. We're made to go out and make disciples. And, at the end of that passage, when he's telling us, a lot of times it's left out, but he says, after he says, go out to all the nations, he says, and teach them to obey my laws. So that's just where I'm at today, is just that obedience, learning that obedience, and then sharing that obedience with other people. We did a grill walk yesterday over in Oklahoma City. And basically, a grill walk is you just hook a grill to the back of the truck, you go out, hand out hot dogs, and knock on doors and ask people if they need prayer, and you tell them Jesus loves them. And, we had an encounter yesterday that I'll never, ever forget. We were pulling up, and we had certain apartments that we were going to do. We had it all planned out. And we pulled into a parking lot, and I saw another apartment complex. And I just got that nudge. So I drove around, and I checked it out. It was just a little 4-building apartment complex, probably not that many apartments in there. And so I called, and I said, yeah, this is where we're going. And it was the second person we talked to. I was with 2 ladies from the ministry, and we go walking up, and the gentleman gets out of the car. It wasn't the best neighborhood, so they were probably worried why 3 people were walking up to him with smiles to their car. And he got out, asked me what we were doing, and I kind of explained it, and he teared up. And he said, that girl right there needs you guys. He goes, God sent you. And so I got to send Becca and Miss Rose over to her, and she was just going through it. And she had no hope and was done. And this gentleman was trying to talk to her the best he could, but she needed more. And if we wouldn't have been there, if we wouldn't have, gone down there, if I wouldn't have obeyed the nudge, it was a tough situation. We got to, and I know it's just hot dogs, but they were hungry. She had kids in the house, they hadn't eaten. We gave them a bunch of hot dogs, and we got them hooked up with the local church down there. So, just what God's doing in my life right now is just that repetitive opportunities. It's just the opportunity to get out there and see somebody smile, see somebody, just get them hooked up with local churches or even ourselves. So I just want to leave you guys with that, that once you become that new creation, you just got to embrace that new. It's scary. It's way out of anybody's comfort zone. I know that, at least for me. And so I'd just like to share that with you guys, and thank you.
Have you ever had a nudge like that to talk to somebody or pray with someone? I hope you're listening to those nudges and doing what God is calling you. We've talked about that in Sunday school, haven't we, Brittany? And Amanda and Jarron, we've talked about that. Josh and Judy. Well, next is Amanda. Do I need to introduce Jarron separate, or?
Yes.
Okay. So Amanda, come up here. I know part of your story, but we all want to know.
So I can use this. Yes, this is my home church, Grace Mennonite. I don't like public speaking, but the church continues to make me get up here and talk. So I'm going to be reading a scripture. Hold on, let me find it. Mark 9:14 through 24. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of his speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him into the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus. "Everything is possible for one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." So, get to where my testimony is how to believe when life doesn't allow you to. It started about 12 years. I'm going to read part of this because I'm just so nervous. I had to write it down. My testimony started 12 years ago, and 9 years ago is when I decided to become a Christian. And for those 9 years, I have spent more time in a deep, dark valley with Christ than I have on a high mountaintop. And sorry if I get emotional. I'm reliving the worst times in my life. And every time I speak about it, it just becomes overwhelming. Because I know how hard it was to get to that point to where I am now. I had an amazing childhood. I was raised by the most perfect, best parents I could ever have. We were raised Catholic, and we always went to church, but as a child, I don't think I really learned anything, or I knew I was a Christian, but I had a perfect life, and I never really had to use that. Nothing ever bad happened to me. So I call it like a piggyback faith. I believed because they believed. I didn't really have any solid rock to stand on when life actually hit me hard. I was 15 when I met my husband, Jarron, who will speak later. So obviously our stories intertwined because we've been together pretty much our whole entire lives. We married at 18, and we moved to California because he wanted to become a Marine, and not just any kind of Marine. He wanted to be an infantry Marine. So I think that's when life really hit us hard. I moved away from my family and my friends. I had a career that didn't transfer to California because of my license. He was gone all the time, obviously. All the field days, he went to Afghanistan, Bridgeport, Mojave Viper. And it was really when he left for Afghanistan and when he came back that our world was just shattered. I'm sure that he'll tell his story, and I don't want to explain too much, but the effects of going to war, people never come home exactly the same. And I'm just so happy and have him back, and we've been together. We decided, let's have a child, because he was obviously going through a really rough time. That will bring joy and happiness into our lives. That's what we need. And so we immediately got pregnant. And we were home for a while, then we moved to California. We moved back to California. And so switching the doctors and stuff, it took a little bit for me to see my new doctor on base. So after we went in for our appointment to see our child, and we were so excited. They had the ultrasound, and it's on your tummy, and you can see just the perfect picture of this little baby on the screen. And you're so excited. I mean, that's all you ever want. But then the text says, "You know what? I'm going to go get a doctor. Like, just hold on for a second." And we're still just talking to ourselves, happy as can be. And then the doctor comes in, and then he's working for a while. And then he says, "I'm sorry to tell you, but your baby has no heartbeat. We don't know when it happened, but it no longer is alive." And that just devastated me, not having my family around and never having a loss in our family. I didn't really know where to turn. And I'll be honest, the first thing, I was angry with God, and I definitely yelled at him. I said I hated him, I resented him, and all the horrible things I don't even want to say I said about God. I didn't want to be a Christian anymore. I didn't believe in him. And then it seemed like after that, everybody in my life got pregnant. And Jarron's mother got pregnant again. And it was just so hard to see everyone getting pregnant when you had just lost your baby. My husband suffered so much through the time of having PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. He started drinking and drinking excessively to try to deal with all that he saw in war. I think I'll let him explain more, but we didn't get along. Obviously, all I wanted to do was talk about the loss of this child, and all he wanted to do was shut it out and to never think about it and didn't talk about it, and he just kept drinking, and things escalated, and our relationship was just very rocky and horrible. But it came to a point where we did end up getting pregnant again. I think it was about 8 months later. And I think for that first 10 weeks, we just walked on eggshells. We didn't really talk about it. We were just hoping for the best. But then when we actually went in for our first doctor's appointment and we heard the heartbeat, I think is just all this relief flooded out. And we were so excited, and Jarron agreed to go to rehab. And so for the very first I think I was 22 weeks when he got out, and we came back home to my family so that we could find out together if it was a boy or girl. And it was in this church that I was sitting there, and I felt Weston, which is my son, kick for the first time. That's it right there. And I knew at that point that I really wanted to thank God for this great gift again. But I didn't. I went through my whole entire pregnancy. I had Weston, and it was about 6 months after he was born that I decided to move back. And then I started thinking, you know what? I really need to stay on my promise. I promised God if He gave me a son, that I would become a Christian and I dedicate my life to Him. I really need to actually do that. So I did. And Pastor Richard was our pastor at the time, and I remember sitting there listening to him, and he said something like, if you're on the train, you better get on. If you're just going to leave the station. If you're not on, you're not on. And I started thinking, am I on that train? I don't know. I was raised a Christian. I believe in God. I've had a falling out, and now I want to dedicate my life to Him. So I called him in, and I said, I don't know if I'm on this train. I want to be. And I became a Christian, and I got baptized at 22 years old. I was baptized as an infant, but I wanted to make that choice again as an adult, saying that I want to do this for you, God. As Weston grew, my love for him grew. However, my loneliness and sadness for this other child also grew. I started thinking about would it have been a girl? Would it have been a boy? What would it have been like for Weston to be not a big brother? He would have been the baby brother, all these ideas. And I became obsessed with wanting to have another child. And he's the most amazing child. If you met him, you would know he's amazing. So why not? I want another one. So when Weston turned 1, we tried for more. Because when I became a Christian, I really thought that was it. That was my hardest point in my life. It's never going to happen again. I'm a Christian. It's all good and uphill from here on out. But little did I know that it was not going to be at all. That wasn't even the worst part of my life, and that I was going to be on a roller coaster, one that goes up and down. And it's like you can see that light at the end of the tunnel, but you never actually reach it. And you just keep going high and then low and then high and low. So that's what I would be on for the next 7 years. So I had 3 miscarriages in a row. Eventually they referred us to a fertility institute. And then when our test results came back, it said that we had less than a 5% chance to have another child. No reason why. Nothing's wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with him. I don't know why. That's just what the test results say, which is so frustrating to like not have an answer. Like if you have a problem, you can fix it. But I feel like we just had a string of bad lucks. The first things we tried was we had three back-to-back IUIs, which all failed. Then we had another miscarriage on Weston's birthday. And it seemed like everything in our life was going wrong. And everything was breaking. My mom had an accident. It just... but the breaking point came 4 years ago, like 4 Thanksgivings ago, when everything we tried different drugs and everything. We had different tests at the facility, but nothing we could have another baby. And it became so obsessed in my mind that it's all I wanted to do. And because of all the fertility drugs, my hormones were all over the place, and it made me extremely depressed to the point that I was having these like suicidal thoughts. And not that I would ever harm myself, but 4 Thanksgivings ago, it was one of those times where like you're late, everyone's waiting for you. I burnt the bread, and Jarron and them all went ahead and left. And I was like, I had only like one thing left that I had cooked that had turned out. And I'm like turning on the dirt road, and it slid over and it spilled. And it's just the simplest thing, but it's the thing that just like broke. And everyone was calling me saying, where are you? Where are you? We're waiting to eat. And all I could think is like, I don't even want to show up. Like, I wish God would just poof me out of this world. Like, all the sadness and misery that I have, like, just take it from me, God. Like, either help me get this baby or just take away this pain that I feel. And I just was praying to him, like, let me have an accident or something. Like, I just don't want to live anymore with this pain and sorrow. If I have 4 babies in heaven, I want to meet them. I want to know them. I didn't know anymore. I was in such a dark and desperate place, and I could see how things couldn't change for the better. And I know every single one of us in here knows exactly what that feels like. We all experience life's cruel blows, but we all keep going and putting our foot forward. And it says, Hebrews 11:1, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. We endure, we have a bigger reason, and that's what I kept hoping for, that I would have a bigger reason someday. So after I discussed this with my husband, because obviously with being going to Afghanistan, having all his friends, he has big knowledge of suicide. And I was honest with him, and we talked about it, and we really thought that, like, let's take out this big loan and let's just try for IVF, which is the top of fertility, and it cost a lot of money. So we were all so hopeful, and we were, this is going to work. And when we went back for our test, now we have less than 3% chance to have a baby. And the numbers just keep plummeting. So we went ahead and went through it. We got 2 embryos at the end of it, our little twins, and we put them in. And I was like, it's going to work, But it didn't work. We lost both of them. And life seemed so unfair, and my faith was shattered, and I didn't understand, and I was at rock bottom. I felt like my faith was like on life support. Like I just needed God to tell me something. And so I decided to go on my 3rd mission trip to Missouri, because I know that I've read in the Bible that you don't get to heaven on works, but I just wanted to show God proof that I'm trying here. Like, I really want to do anything that will help you see favor in me, even though I know that's not how it works. And so when I was on this mission trip, like I said, I hate public speaking. And we were in this room of people, and we're all crowded around, and they were like, you're going to pray. We're going to go around and we're going to keep praying, and you're going to pray and pray and pray. And I'm like, that's my worst fear. I don't know if my church knows this, but I do not like to pray in front of people. And I don't know if it was just my hormones and everything I'm going through. I just completely lost it and broke down in front of all these strangers and started weeping and crying and was so embarrassed. I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want to pray. And I was like, oh my gosh, my church is going to be so embarrassed of me. Like, what a representative I am that I'm like weeping here and like saying, I don't want to pray. I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to. And I didn't. And I got on the phone that night to my husband and I said, I want to come home. Like, I did not expect this on my mission trip. They sent me here to do paintings. I like to paint. I'm an artist. I want to paint wall murals. I didn't know that they were going to be sending me out house to house to talk to people and pray with people. I'm like, that's not me. Like, just stick me in a corner where I'm not talking. I just want to paint. And he was like, man, you should just do it. And I was like, you know what? That's what I think about you. You should just do it. Because at this point, my husband is not a Christian. He wasn't raised in a Christian home, and he has no desire to be a Christian. And I've always wanted that for him. Having Christian, like my mom and dad being Christians, I just saw that in my husband. And we'd always argued about this. And he'd always say, yeah, I'll do it. But he never does. So that's what I was like, well, you should do it. And then he was like, you know what? I just might. And then he was like, if you go back and you pray the next day, then I'll think about actually being a Christian. So the next day I did. I like faced my fears and I went around and I prayed with people and talked to people. And when I came back from my mission trip, I told the church this, I was honest. And my husband did decide to get baptized. And he got baptized with my son, Weston. So they both received Jesus, and they both got baptized on the same day, which led me to a book in the Christian store. So I went to get them both Bibles, and I want to write their name on the Bible, and they're like, well, it's going to be 30 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I went around the Christian store, and I was looking, and this book caught my eye. So it was called Hope in the Dark. And I went home that night, and I started reading it. And when I was reading it, I read that passage about how it said, if you can, when the father was like, if you can heal my son, can you? And Jesus is like, if I can, like, do you not believe? And I swear it was like Jesus, it was just like he hit me on the back of the head. Like, that is literally what I'm talking about. I'm talking to you. Like, you say, oh, I believe, and I'm going on these mission trips, and I'm such a good Christian, but I didn't truly believe. Like, in my heart, I knew for myself, my circumstances, this many years in, that all the things I had gone through and all the losses I felt, that it wasn't ever going to happen for me. It might happen for other people, but it wasn't going to happen for me. That I had serious doubts, and that I was secretly cramming them deep down, pretending not to have them, and along with having the anger and resentment, something that I promised God that I would never have again. So knowing that I had those feelings, I'm like, well, I know that God knows. And all along he knew, and he was letting me stew and learn the hard way a long lesson about true faith. And I knew in that instant I wanted to believe. I wanted to overcome my unbelief, and if I could, then I knew God would be there to meet me halfway and restore me along with everything that I had lost along the way. But at first, I knew that I had to be honest and I had to come clean. So our house is on 9 acres, and one evening I decided I was just going to go out there. And I walked aimlessly around with my eyes closed and my hands up, and I was screaming and crying. I would knelt down, and I'd be on my knees. I'd pray. I feel like if anybody drove by, they would think I was drunk out there or crazy, lost my mind. But I was letting it all out, even though I knew I was making a complete fool of myself and being embarrassed. I told him everything. And I wrote down at the time some of the things that I had said, so I'm going to read them to you. These are the things I was screaming and crying. I said, I am lost, I am broken, my heart is battered, bruised, and scarred. My soul is shattered, I feel numb and paralyzed with grief and utter sadness. I feel rage and disappointment, confusion. I am drowning, and you're letting it happen. Where are you, God? And what are you doing to help me? Do you care? Do you hear me? Do you even want to fix me and help me? Are you my father? How could you let me suffer on and on? Don't you keep track of all the tears that I have cried? I know it's overflowing in a little bottle. I blame you for not rescuing me in my time of need, when I have begged and pleaded time and time again. I know you are powerful, so do something, change something. Take this desire away from me. I have limitations, but you have none. I want to serve you, but I cannot do so in this state. How can this be good for the kingdom of heaven, that I am so broken that I don't even want to be here? Why give me this testimony that has no end, that has no happy ending? How can I possibly tell it and not have a happy ending and inspire other people to believe too? I am battling hopelessness and severe jealousy. I'm struggling, like really struggling, and this feels like an impossible situation to overcome. I'm downright mad at you, and I have feelings of resentment and mixed signals. I need a giant billboard with flashing lights that say, this way, do this. I want you to do this and be this, because I am so lost. You are supposed to guide me. Where is my light? Where is my shepherd? And I need you now. This is it. I'm done. I'm finally truly at my breaking point. Nothing, and I mean nothing, I have left to give. Pick me up and carry me the rest of the way, because I cannot make it on my own. I have given all that I have to give, and I've wrestled and I have fought for so long. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what my purpose is, and I can no longer see the path you have before me. I don't know your will for me anymore. Forgive me for feeling this way, but I am listening. I want to follow. I want your will, so just tell me what it is. I will listen with an open heart and mind. And then we took our son to Lion King. Because I prayed that, and then nothing happened, just like, okay. Then we went to the Lion King, which is probably a movie we've all seen. And I was sitting there like nothing else, and it comes to the point where the monkey has taken Simba to that big lake, and he's looking in, and he says, don't quote me because I don't know exactly what the words are, but it's pretty much like, look in. Do you see your reflection? Like, do you see your father? And Simba's like, no. He's like, no, you look again. Like, look. And I just had that feeling that God was telling me, like, look, like when people look at me, I want them to also see you, like God, And I just need to believe. And I was feeling like he was like, you should try this again with a different outlook. Now that you really, truly believe in me and you have come clean, like I want you to see me and I want you to try again. And so I had this conversation with my husband. I'm like, let's take out another loan. Let's try IVF again. And he was like, no way. And we talked about it, and then we decided to do it. And it said, I have written down, God is not concerned about our earthly happiness. He's more worried about our eternal happiness. It took 10 years for God to truly get me alone, to learn and listen to him, that when the going gets rough and deep down my struggle with my unbelief, that I didn't trust his plan and his perfect timing. But his perfect timing was about to happen. So we did IVF for the second time, and we got another little embryo. And on the day that we were supposed to transfer it, I was having those feelings of unbelief again. I'm like, nope, no, I can't do it. Like, I don't think I want to transfer it. And I told the doctor that. I'm like, I don't think I want to transfer. I think we just should freeze it, and we should wait. Because, like, I think I need to wait for God to give me a sign. And she was like, no, you should not wait. Like, this embryo, it grades from, like, A to F, And she was like, this embryo graded AA, which is, like, never heard of. Like, it's very, very rare. It's like, she said it was on fire. Like, it was just... I wish I'd brought in a picture. It's like a teeny tiny cell, and it's the most miraculous thing. And she's like, I'm going to take a picture of you, and I'm going to show you, because it's like breaking out. Like, it's ready to attach, and like you should put it in. And she can't say it's going to work, but like she was making me very hopeful. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take this as a sign, God, and I'm going to do it. And we sat there and we transferred it in, and my husband and I sat there in the room, and we prayed and we prayed. And we held this little picture that they printed out from the microscope, and we prayed over this little tiny cell. We're like, please let this, like, Lord, like, we know this is going to happen. Our faith is now bigger because of you, and we know. And that's how our outlook was for everything else. Like, it's not a possibility, it's going to happen. Like, we planned as is, God had already done it. And to this day, God has definitely shown us that when you trust, like, he will show up. Like, he's rarely early, never late, always on time. So now that we have our daughter, and if you have ever met my daughter, you will definitely know that she is on fire for sure. She's a little spitfire. She is so full of life, and I can't even imagine not having her. She has definitely made our lives and our family whole, and she has made my heart whole. And I think that I needed to fully grieve and let out all my pain that I had felt so that there'd be space inside for my faith. I have, what if wanting to believe is enough? What if simply wanting to believe is the mustard seed of faith? What if a tiny bit of faith is actually extreme faith because it takes so much more to believe? And guess what? God did have a plan for us. Maybe it wasn't my timing, but it was his perfect timing because of that mustard seed kind of faith. We wanted to believe against all odds, and we did. Do not be afraid to ask God why and to yell at him, to come to God with all your doubts and fears. Be transparent and be truthful. Be truthful to yourself. Wrestle with God, question him, lean into your own hardships. Let God get you alone and listen to him. Wait, be patient, remember, accept, trust, hope, and last but not least, believe. I said Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understandings, will guard your heart with your mind in Jesus Christ. I think it's easy to be thankful when things are going right, but I think it's even better to be thankful for your problems and your hardships and everything that's going wrong in your life. As crazy as that might sound, I'm thankful for everything that happened, all the bad things, because all those things connected. When my husband had such a horrible time, and his horrible time strengthened him to be prepared to help me in my horrible time. It's easy to be thankful when you're on this high mountaintop with God. But that's not where faith and growth happens. It happens in the dark, deep valleys. That's where you grow. So I'm thankful for those valleys. Stronger faith is born out of great difficulties in the valleys. Trials and suffering create perseverance, character, and hope, because faith isn't faith until it's all you're holding on to. When you have nothing left to grasp for Jesus. Reach towards the heaven and shout, help me, Lord, help me with my unbelief. Help me. And this time, really mean it. So that's my testimony. Yes.
Praise the Lord. God does works in ways that we don't always understand, but he's always working. Well, Jarron, you get to follow that. Appreciate Jarron. He never gets real excited, but when I asked him about, would you share? He said, oh yeah, I'll share. And the last Sunday, Amanda asked you, I said, oh yeah, I got a lot to talk about. So there you go, Jarron.
Thank you. Get my notes open here. So I'm sure as you've heard, this is our home church. We've attended here for over 10 years. And I'm sure for some of you, this will be the most you've ever heard me speak. So I apologize for that. And a special thanks to Verlin for volunteering me tonight. Thank you. So depending on how this goes, we may have some words afterwards. So I wanted to start mine with saying, embrace suffering. Jesus promised two things: a cross to die on and eternal life. So a little bit about my early childhood. I was not fortunate enough to grow up in a Christian household. My earliest memories were my father would take us to church to socialize and network for his business. So, and I remember doing that a few times, and that was about it. When I was around 12, my parents sat me and my younger brother and sister down and told us they were getting a divorce. None of us really knew what was going on, and we were all confused and scared. My mother, me, and my siblings moved out that night. The following couple of years were really hard. I watched my mother struggle as a single parent of 3 children trying to make ends meet. My brother began having serious mental health issues and lived in and out of inpatient care facilities for it. And this went on until he was in his late teens. I would also see a side of my father I never knew existed during this time as well. He would come over drunk and verbally and physically abuse my mother in front of us children. So that was pretty rough. But fast forward, it goes from really bad to okay, but my parents were able to reconcile their differences sometime later, and my father moved back in with us, but my parents would never remarry. And around the same time in 2005 was when I met my future wife, Amanda, while we were in high school. My junior year in high school, I was, like any other typical high schooler, I was torn on what I wanted to do with my life. So I knew I was either going to join the military or do something in the automotive industry. And I always kind of knew it would probably be the military. I grew up playing outside and, playing as any typical boy would, playing Army and playing with guns and things like that. So I was pretty dead set on that. And so my junior year, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and I knew I wanted to be in the infantry. I wasn't going to settle for anything else. And I always wondered why that was. I just wanted to get the full experience, I guess, and travel and help protect other people. So anyways, I went to boot camp after graduating, and then infantry school, and got to the fleet. Me and my wife got married in July of 2009, and during that, we were at the rifle range qualifying, and I hopped on a plane, flew home that weekend, and got married and flew back and went to training. So a couple months later, her and her parents moved her out, and I remember my father-in-law said that he was petrified to leave her with me because of the living conditions that we had. We had this tiny 1-bedroom, 1 bathroom loft, and it was completely empty. There was nothing in it. All we had at the time was, I had a TV, which was on an MRE box, and then I had a couch that a fellow guy I served with found in a dumpster and brought. So we literally had nothing. So anyways, kudos to them for actually leaving her with me. Fast forward a little bit, in March of 2010, I would leave to Afghanistan. I was excited to be a part of something bigger than myself and optimistic to influence change in the world. Little did I know the world was about to change me. The first few months of deployment were exciting but relatively normal. Now, when I say normal, it wasn't entirely normal. I mean, we were exposed to things that no human should have to see, and living that day in and day out, it really changes a person. You kind of become numb to the world, and your version of reality is skewed. About halfway through deployment, we moved to a place called Sangin, Afghanistan. We had been told from the higher command this place would be the Wild West and would truly test us all. The living conditions while there were horrible, to say the least. We were starving all the time. We would run out of food and water, and were sleep deprived day in and day out. I lost 30 pounds during this time of my life, which for somebody of my size is quite a bit of weight. So that's how rough it was. One particular day I'll expand on was September 16, 2010, a day all of us that I served with would call D-Day, a day we would all never forget. On this day, we would suffer mass casualties, endure a 10-hour firefight, kill over 300 enemy combatants, and call in multiple danger-close airstrikes on our own position to prevent being overrun by the enemy. During these events that day, at one particular point, the volume of enemy fire was so overwhelming that I was succumbing to the fact that I was going to die. Bullets were impacting all around me just a few feet away. It would be and was the first time in my life I would truly beg God for mercy. I remember thinking, please God, just don't let me get shot in the face. Miraculously, I survived that day, relatively completely unscathed, minus a concussion from the airstrikes. I remember later that day, when everything had died down, we were holding security in a tree line. I was leaning against the tree and was staring up at the sky, watching the clouds go by and listening to the wind through the trees and corn. Birds were chirping, and it was the oddest thing in the world. Like, how could it go from complete chaos to serenity so quickly? The sensation of living after brushing so close to death is truly something I cannot begin to explain. The wind was chilling, and all the colors seemed amazingly vibrant. I found an overwhelming sense of peace come over me. Even after all that, I don't recall ever thanking God. A little over a month later, we left and began returning home. When we left the forward operating base we were conducting out of, we got back to Camp Leatherneck, which was the main base of operations in Afghanistan. And it was a substantially large base. If I had to put in perspective, it was probably the size of Enid or bigger. And they had buses that would take you everywhere. We arrived in the middle of the night that's when they just did the troop movements for security reasons. They didn't want any helicopters or planes getting shot down. So I remember when we got there, it was late and all the buses had stopped running for the night. And I remember everybody asked, like, hey, is the chow hall open? And because we were all starving, and they said, yeah, it is. So we started to go down there, and we're waiting at the bus stop, and that's when we learned that the buses weren't running. And everybody just started sprinting to the chow hall. And I was astonished when I walked in because there was endless amounts of food, endless amounts of drinks. I couldn't believe that you could just go from complete starvation to nothing at a moment's notice. So to this day, that's like the most food I've ever eaten in my life. It was there. So, upon returning to the United States, I was on an unimaginable high. I was grateful to be alive and excited to see my loved ones. I wish I had known that feeling would soon wear off. Things were great for some time. Amanda became pregnant with our first child, and we were excited. I quickly noticed negative changes in my demeanor, but I kept it to myself. Little did I know something more sinister was developing. And it's a proven statistic that most people with PTSD won't develop symptoms for 6 to 9 months after their said experiences. And that was around the same time that we were expecting our first child. You can't really truly live until you have almost died. And when you come so close to that, so low and close, everything and every day feels like a gift, every little moment. And I was about to throw that gift I had been given by God away. We went in for a scheduled follow-up pregnancy appointment, as she kind of touched on, and came out heartbroken when we were told that our expected child had no heartbeat. A mentor of mine and someone I greatly looked up to once told me, every man has their breaking point. The loss of our child and the issues I had been dealing with were that point for me, and my world came crashing down. Due to the severe mental and physical trauma I had experienced during deployment, I became an unemotional, robotic-like, cruel human being. I was tapped out and had absolutely nothing else left to give. I could not be there for my wife emotionally and mentally. I was not and couldn't be supportive to her when she was going through one of the hardest moments in her life. I was completely checked out, and it was only going to get worse. Alcohol began to be an scapegoat for me. I had been a casual drinker before, but noticed I began drinking more and more. I was self-medicating because when I was intoxicated, I could be a normal human being again. I could laugh, I could smile, I could have a regular conversation, all while not being tormented by my past. I had become obsessed. This was my world, all while my wife was suffering. At the time, she took it as I didn't care, but that was the furthest thing from the case. In my mind, I knew everything I wanted to say and feel, but nothing would come out, nothing would show. At that period in my life, I began to hate the world and the people in it. I cared about nothing and was just worried about the next time I could forget it all. I was lost and just wanted to watch the world burn. I made an astronomical large amount of horrible decisions and mistakes. It was one of the worst periods of my life. This went on for quite some time. Just when we needed it most, Amanda became pregnant with our second child. We were both hopeful but scared. I thought the news of this would pull me out of the darkness I was in. It did, but only temporarily. I started to go to a specialty clinic on base. It's called Deployment Health. It's basically a establishment for service members dealing with deployment-related issues. And I thought that would be the cure to all my problems. And they prescribed me on a slew of medications, and I was optimistic. As time went on, things didn't get better, and my drinking became worse. Although the pregnancy was going great, my wife gave me an ultimatum. Either truly get help, or they were leaving, and she would raise our child alone. Hearing that was enough for me, and the next day I went and checked into an inpatient substance abuse treatment facility. Over the next 35 days, I would learn more things than I could ever dream of and begin my healing process. When I arrived there and began meeting and getting to know the people, I learned that out of the 180 patients that were there, all being active duty military members from all branches, that only myself and one other patient were combat veterans. I was astonished and figured it would be the other way around. While there, we would have these small group sessions, and it was just a group of 10 patients or so, and everybody would talk about their issues and problems and bounce feedback off one another. Thankfully, the other combat veteran was in my group, and neither of us ever spoke in that group. We would just sit and judge and laugh about how minuscule we thought their issues were behind closed doors. I carried on my time there and completed the program. It took me almost 10 years to realize that no matter how big or small of a situation someone is going through, in comparison to your own struggles, one thing remains the same. The thoughts and emotions are the same. What may be the worst day of someone else's life might not be to you, or vice versa. We all feel the same emotions. We all feel sadness, regret, hurt, happiness, etc. So we all have something relatable to bond over. I believe God helped me to see that. And my time spent in this program exposed me to this concept, and I am truly thankful for this experience. I was too naive and set in my ways to see it back then, though. I would remain sober for a year after doing so, after completing the program. It was really hard, but the upcoming birth of our now son, Weston, kept my mind busy and in line. In May of 2012, he was born, and it was one of the best days of my life. I did thank God for giving us him, although my relationship with God was still non-existent at this point. I thought I had all the reason to change and be the person I was meant to be, although I had this darkness looming over me. Towards the end of 2012, we moved back home to Enid and began attending Grace Mennonite with my wife's grandfather, Don. Although I attended regularly, I didn't want to. I always thought with my history that I would burst into flames as soon as I walked in the doors. For years I attended, and I was just another person in the pews, someone who wasn't there mentally during the sermons, who didn't want to be there, and was just another lost soul worried about earthly desires. I began to notice changes in my wife. I could see after her baptism at the church. The goodness God was bringing to her, I felt left behind. Imagine being in a race, and they fire the gun for the race to start, but you're chained to the ground, and you can't move, and everyone else takes off like a bolt of lightning. all while you're screaming, "Wait for me." I remember, I remember Pastor Richard coming by to speak to me about becoming a Christian. At that time, I was entirely not ready. I found Christians to be hypocritical, and my mind was still not in the right place. I felt as if it would be destructive to myself to attempt it, as I would be too hard on myself for not being perfect 100% of the time. And I thought to myself too, how could there be a God in the world if seeing the worst of it, I guess. Ever since our son was born, we knew we wanted another child. We had tried to make that a reality, but things just weren't working out for us. Time went on, and my wife became more and more involved with the church. She began going on mission trips. While she was on the third one, she called me, which she briefly talked about that, and I just told her to just do it, to just pray in front of people, like it was no big deal. And then she asked me, why don't you become a Christian? I said, well, I might just do that. And I had been considering it for some time, but I needed a little push in the right direction to take that initial leap. And I thought to myself, if she can do the hardest thing to her, which is pray in front of people, how come I can't become a Christian? I intended to do it the following Sunday at church. I got cold feet and put it off for a few more weeks. I remember my wife would always look up at me and ask, "Are you going to do it?" And I would shake my head no and back out. After those few weeks, we were at the closing hymn of invitation, and we were standing there singing it. And I remember she looked up at me and she said, "Are you going up there?" I said yes, and I started scooting down the aisle. She immediately broke into tears. As I exited the aisle and walked to the front, Pastor Richard saw me, and he broke into tears. And at that point in my life, I hadn't shed a single tear in over 10 years, and it took every ounce of discipline in my body to keep from crying myself. My eyes definitely got a little watered. There were a lot of allergies in the air that night. And I became a Christian in April of 2019. And I thought, as soon as I became a Christian, that my journey was over and it'd be smooth sailing, like this wave of faith in God would fill my body, and I would be complete. I thought to myself, wow, now that I have surrendered my life to God, just imagine how much he can do with me on his side. What a trophy, lucky God. In my selfishness, I thought my surrender to God meant that I had hit rock bottom. I thought that special day would mark the beginning of doing something great for God, and in a way it did. But first God said, okay, now that I have your attention, I have some important things to teach you that you haven't been willing to hear. The following months that after becoming a Christian were difficult for my family. We still couldn't have the second child we were desperately yearning for. This was extremely difficult for my wife. This really began to wear her down and truly test her faith. I think it's important that in a marriage, when your partner is struggling, you pick them up and pull the extra weight. And I was doing that to the best of my ability. Let's see here. I lost my place. Sorry. Okay. As it was the least I could do, as she was strong for me when I was down. It was hard to watch someone as solid in their faith as her question it when I myself had just become a Christian. How could I encourage the woman who has always been the faith leader in our household with my history and experiences of seeing things differently? Something amazing and unexpected happened. For once in our relationship, we had traded places, and I could be the person to reassure her in her faith. I remember one of the first few sermons that Pastor Mike gave was about how we experience God differently through other people. And Pastor Mike's story about when evening church was dismissed, they walked out the back door of the church, and everyone was talking about the glory of God through the beautiful colors of the sunset. And he was thinking, there must be a lot of dirt in the sky tonight. This story resonated with me, and a lot of things clicked. That was the perfect description of how I experienced faith in my life through others. That little by little, God was showing me all the puzzle pieces I needed to be a great faith leader for my household. Together, we strengthened each other to have the unbreakable faith that God was going to answer our prayers, and he did. In June of 2020, my daughter Elena would be born, and I think God definitely made her extra special. I guess what the conclusion of my story is, sometimes while you're going through things, you ask yourself why, and then looking back now, you realize why you needed that lesson. How does God get us on his agenda? He enrolls us in character college to open our eyes and change the way we see the world. During that time, for me, he was speaking to my heart and working some things into my character and working some things out. When the body suffers, sin loses power. Yes, character college is painful, but God uses that pain like a can opener to get inside our hearts and open us to the I can't read my own handwriting. To the transforming power of his Spirit. If we don't go through it, then we won't learn everything he has for us in it. Instead, pray that you will learn everything God has for you during these experiences, so you won't have to travel down that road again. Sorry. So I'm still pretty early in my spiritual journey, so I have a lot to learn. I'm always learning things. One thing I want to mention is the deployment that I was on was the most kinetic deployment the Marine Corps has had to this date since Vietnam. And over 50 people at this point that I know and I served with have committed suicide since. So the attrition rate is not well. But I've already seen God do a lot of amazing things in my life, and I'm thankful for that. So thank you.
I appreciate that story. Never heard that, and if we wouldn't have these nights, we wouldn't hear that either. So, man, and Jarron, appreciate you guys and what you're sharing, and how God is working. There's greater things ahead, and we'll keep moving. Beau, and we've had our time, but that's okay. This is so great. And Beau, he was here when we were in between pastors and shared his testimony, and then he's been back to Manila since then. And so he's fresh back here in the United States. And so, Beau, come and share with us. Just appreciate you and get to know you. No problem.
All good. That's all good. Oh, wow. I feel special now. So I did come and speak last time and go over who I am, what I do, organization I work for, and I'll just run through that real quickly. I'm Beau Makenzie, and I grew up here in Enid, Oklahoma, and I work for an organization that fights human trafficking overseas in many different countries. They're still going into different countries, so I'm not up to date on it, but we're in the Philippines, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, India. Let's see. They've gone into a lot more. I'm having a hard time keeping up. But I'm stationed in the Philippines, and how I heard about Destiny Rescue was through a Promise Keepers event. My father would take us boys and go on a guy's trip. Higher. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that. But we go on a guy's trip to a Promise Keepers event, and at the Promise Keepers event, they had a speaker come up and talk about human trafficking, kind of what it was, and my heart just broke, and I thought, oh, that's what I need to go fight. And it took 3 or 4 years. I actually found Destiny Rescue on Google. I was just searching different organizations that fight human trafficking, and I started emailing them and bugged them for about a year until they said, all right, we've got a position for you. And how they operate, how they work, is we have a rescue division and we have an aftercare division and a prevention division. I work in the rescue division, and what we do is we go in and we go into bars, red light districts, pretty much anywhere you follow the money, where tourism is, you're going to find trafficking. And we search for young women, young girls that are in there that are exploited. And once we find them, we build a trust relationship with them just by sitting with them, not being crude. You know what goes on in those brothels and bars. And they'll immediately know that we're different because we're not doing the normal things that the guys do in there. And over time, that trust is built, and then we get to say, all right, what's something you've wanted to do your entire life? What's your dreams and aspirations? And for instance, one girl I talked to said she wanted to be a cook. That was her dream. And we eventually got her with our aftercare team. I invited her out to lunch, and she spoke with our aftercare team, our women, and they got her out into one of our safe houses. They provided her with everything she needed with school, allowance. A lot of the girls are in the bars, whether it's due to being tricked into it or into debt. A lot of it is school. They'll go to the big cities to work and send money back to the family and try to go to school as well. These recruiters for the red light districts will pick them up at different bus stations, wherever they can find them. And they'll say, well, we'll buy your books for you. We'll put you up in our house, and you can pay rent to us. And eventually they get in so much debt, they can't pay it back, so they put them to work as a waitress and eventually get them stuck into that. And they accumulate so much debt they can't get out. So that's one method we do to get them out, is that trust building process. And the other one is if we find more than one girl in there, we'll go to the police. We have a couple contacts with the MBI, which is like the FBI in the Philippines, and a few different divisions, and some guys we know really well, and we'll take a case to them, and then we'll go on a sting operation, shut down the bar, arrest the pimps, and bring the girls into a safe house where our aftercare workers are allowed to come in and work with them, share the gospel to them, and help the social workers and the government as a collaboration to get those girls to where they need to be and help them care for their families. So that's Destiny Rescue. That's kind of what I do. And afterwards, I'll stick around for a little bit if you guys have any questions and answers, or if you have any answers for me. But I'll answer any questions you guys have. I'm back raising funds. It's a volunteer position, and I'll just make it short and sweet. That's who I am. That's Destiny Rescue, and that's mainly how we operate, and kind of what happens with trafficking there, how they are exploited and get into that. There are the more dramatic cases that we've come across where they were kidnapped, or there's parents trying to sell their kids overseas, which is horrible to see. But so that would be all. I'll just keep it short and sweet.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad I got to know Beau through his parents when we was going through our neighborhood, and just started praying for. And his parents are very strong Christians and doing a lot of things, and I'm glad we got to meet Beau and been praying for him every day. You don't know that, but I am. You're on my list.
Oh, you told me before.
Oh, okay. Pray for you, and let's just have a prayer for Beau, because I think what he's doing is awesome to help girls get out of those situations and share Christ with them. So, God, I just want to pray for Beau and the ministry that he's in, and just pray that help him to raise the funds quickly that he needs so he can go back. And I just pray that you would use him in a mighty way, and that your hand will be on him, and your Holy Spirit will work through him in the lives of many other people in Jesus' name.
I
Go
guess
back there.
lastly, I would like to say that since I am back raising funds, I do have a group of people that's a part of my team that I'll send newsletters to about whatever raids we do, how many rescues in that month, and just kind of keep people updated. So it's kind of a fun, they give, and it's a collaboration there. And just as a praise, the last week before I came back, we had 2 raids. I was extremely busy. We had 2 raids that equaled up to about 40 rescues in Mindanao and southern Luzon, different islands there. And just some of the biggest raids I've been on, about 20 apiece, and it was pretty awesome to see. In fact, on the last raid we did before I came back, first time this ever happened, the girls were actually singing outside of the vans. Usually they're pretty scared and not knowing what's going on, but they knew exactly what was going on. They were happy they were getting away, and they were singing and having a little party. It was pretty awesome to see. Yeah. Thank you.
We're going to sing the song that we end the other 2 with, and you can sing along with me if you know it. Lord, lay... Oh. Okay. You didn't know he could talk this way.
Sorry. I just want to let everybody know, just in case they were wondering, I've been sober for 6 years, but I continue to do so.
Okay, the song.